All right, kia ora everyone. It's Nathan Rose from Capgemini here in beautiful and at the moment very cold Auckland, New Zealand. A few days ago, I shared with you a first look at low-code PowerFX plugins calling stored procedures in SQL Server, which is one of the features that's been included with the experimental feature low-code PowerFX plugins that was announced at MS Build just a couple of months ago. So what I want to do is share with you a bit more of a complex scenario that I was hoping to use this feature for, take you through my thinking, how I would like to see this work. Now, at the moment, it's not working for me. And if any of you watching this have experience with stored procedures in SQL Server and can point out any obvious mistakes I'm making, I'd be very grateful. But let me talk you through the scenario and how I see low-code plugins being really beneficial here, and specifically the ability to call SQL Server. So a few years ago, I was working on a project for a client based here in New Zealand who priced their products in New Zealand dollars, but sold them all over the world. And what they would do is they'd price their deals in the local currencies. So if they were selling in the UK, it would be priced in British pounds, US dollars in the US, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that they allowed their sales team to do was manually input the exchange rate on the order in customer engagement. I know, I can't believe it either. When my team and I pushed back on this with them, we were told that they wanted the salespeople to have some flexibility around the exchange rate so that they could be competitive on their deals. Okay, I get it. When you're competing against companies all over the world, sometimes you need to be able to be a bit competitive on price, and foreign exchange definitely does enter into the equation. However, allowing users to manually input something like an exchange rate opens you up to all kinds of issues, from the clerical, say I put in 63 when I meant to put in 0.63, through to all kinds of avenues for fraud and other more sinister things. So I've been thinking about this for a while, and I thought, okay, we want the salespeople to be able to manually input the exchange rate to be competitive on the deal and have some negotiations with the customer. But at the same time, I do want to have some controls around it just to weed out, say, any obvious clerical errors, as well as limit avenues for fraudulent behavior. So I thought, okay, what if we had an allowable range, say a percentage, and within this percentage, we allow the salesperson to input that rate, and then outside of that, we flag an error, something like that. Now, I initially tried to do this with PowerFX columns, but as many of you know, the currency table in Dataverse isn't particularly extensible. It's pretty much locked down in terms of what you can do with it. And so this is where I got really excited about being able to call a stored procedure in SQL with a low-code plugin, because this does two things. Firstly, your exchange rate data is probably going to be mastered in an ERP system, something like that, which would output quite well to SQL. And also it allows us to have that extensibility to put in um, some additional columns, say an allowed exchange rate variance or something like that. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'll take you through the table I've created in SQL, the stored procedure that I created with the assistance of my colleague Clive, and then we'll get into the plugin, and I'll show you where I'm having some trouble at the moment. So let's quickly share my screen, and this is my SQL table. So I've created a very simple table in SQL. It has a currency, an exchange rate, and then an allowed discount rate. So depending on the currency, we allow a different amount of variance. So based on that, we've then created the stored procedure. And what this stored procedure does is it basically declares some variables, takes the exchange rate in my SQL table, compares it to the exchange rate that's coming from the row in Dataverse, and then works out whether or not that works out whether or not the exchange rate is within this allowed rate of variance. So now what I was hoping for this to do is output a message back to the user in the model driven app. So I've formatted my message variable here as an output variable. Again, if any of you are more clued up on stored procedures in SQL than I am, and notice any obvious issues or errors, do call it out, because this isn't my natural area of expertise. But as far as I know, this has been formatted as an output variable. So then when I come to my model-driven app and the Dataverse Accelerator app, and let's take a look at this plugin. You can see that all my variables are coming in as input variables, including this message, which I would expect as an output parameter. Now there is a documented limitation with low-code plugins where you can't write to Dataverse from SQL. But at the same time, I don't want to actually write to Dataverse. I just want to display a message to the user here to say, hey, this is outside of the expected range. So let's go ahead, and what I'll do is I'll actually show that I can call the stored procedure from the plugin. It does work. So here in my table, I've added this column called SP run, and what it does is it's just going to put either this greater or less based on the calculation from the stored procedure. So it's proving to me that I am successfully calling it from the model driven app. So we are mostly there. The only thing it's not doing is giving me this output variable that I'm expecting to see. And again, I can't work out, is this something that I've done incorrectly in my stored procedure, or is this just a limitation of low code plugins at this time? So let's come into the model driven app. Let's go ahead and quickly run this stored procedure. We'll come back here to SQL. Let's requery our database. And the demo gods are not smiling on me today. Try it again. Back here. There we go. Okay, so we've called you can see that we've successfully called our stored procedure. The exchange rate from our sales order is less than the allowable variance for that particular currency. So the only thing that we're not getting back is some kind of message, some kind of output variable back to the model driven app. So again, unsure if that's just a limitation at the moment of this feature, but bear in mind this was just announced a couple months ago at Build, so this is still in its early days. But this is something that I had in mind as would be a perfect use case for the low code plugins and the ability to call a stored procedure in SQL. This ability to take an exchange rate that's been entered by a salesperson and then work out, is this within an allowed range of variance? So if any of you have any comments, anything that any helpful hints or tips, anything that maybe I've done incorrectly in my stored procedure, do drop a comment. I'm quite keen to keep going with this to see if I can get an output variable back to my model driven app. But thanks so much for watching. I hope this was helpful.